started collecting in 1970, and at that time I lived in a different city, and there was a man across the street that had a few insulators, and they were colorful insulators, and it caught my attention. So I became interested in them, and he had Crown Jewels magazine. And so talking to him, started subscribing to the magazine and got more interested in it. Started ordering lists of insulators, buying and selling like that. Of course, I was going to college at the time, still had 2 or 3 years or 2 years to go on a limited income. But I had to buy a few insulators along. You know, I started collecting Brookfields, and when I went to Lamar University, they had old volumes of trade journals, and in those trade journals they had illustrations of insulators. And of course, history is a big part of collecting insulators to me. Started seeing things about Fredlock insulators and other things of history. We went to our first insulator show at Kansas City National, which was the third national. So I quickly became interested in porcelain insulators at that time. I guess the first dream piece was a Pass and Seymour bullet. Jack Todd made a drawing of the Pass and Seymour bullet, the U-141, and it was an elusive piece. He never could find the bullet. I forgot the guy's name in Colorado who kept saying he had the Pass and Seymour. But every show he went to, he said, I haven't brought it yet, but I will bring it to a show one of these days. Well, after several shows, he finally brought it. I think it was a Cedar Rapids National. And he kept promising me he would bring it. Well, when he opened the box up and pulled it out, there it was, a white Pass and Seymour bullet. And I remember he wanted $600 for it. It was a lot of money back in the, must have been in the early 80s. At that time, it was the only insulator known. There are two, I found out later, there are two in the Smithsonian. And to this day, it's still the only one in the hobby. Eventually, in the porcelain collector group, became interested in multi-part porcelain insulators. Everybody brought in multi-part insulators, and there was a lot of interest, but we didn't know how to categorize them. Chris Hedges and I thought that, well, perhaps we could start laying out a category for those, but no one really wanted to take the ball to do it. So I decided I'd just start laying out the M chart myself. So I went home and laid out an M chart and wrote the first book about multi-part insulators. I forgot what year it was. It must have been back in the late 90s, I think it was, maybe 1993. And we learned more and more about multi-part insulators. People started sending me pictures of different styles which weren't in that first book, and it just mushroomed. There was a lot of interest in multi-part insulators. It was amazing. So fairly recently, I had a white gutter, which I traded to a real good friend of mine, Mike Spadafora. That's one of my regrets. But I know it was eventually going to go to him. This is one of the greatest hobbies in the world, really. And there are friends all over the country, and the National is a place to renew friendships. And you know, there are friends that I've communicated with over the years that many I've never met. Some I meet for the first time at a National. But like I say, others I've still never met, but I've communicated with for decades. So it's a great hobby.